had a revelation the other day. Things aren't going to be that bad with Star Wars. Once we get through the Han Solo movie, Episode 9, and this rumored Rian Johnson trilogy, we're done. We're good. It's going to be a long while until there's another Star Wars movie. Oh, God damn it. So the news came out today that some guys who worked on the Game of Thrones television series are going to work on a Star Wars movie. So this article comes directly from the top, StarWars.com. You can't get much cleaner than that. And it's titled, Game of Thrones creators David Benioff and D.B. Weiss to write and produce a new series of Star Wars films. Ugh. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss are going from Winterfell to a galaxy far, far away. It was announced today that Benioff and Weiss, creators of the smash hit Emmy Award-winning television series Game of Thrones, will write and produce a new series of Star Wars films. Yay. These new films will be separate from both the episodic Skywalker saga and the recently announced trilogy being developed by Rian Johnson, writer-director of Star Wars The Last Jedi. David and Dan are some of the best storytellers working today, said Kathleen Kennedy, president of Lucasfilm. I hate reading those words. It's like a bad dream. Their command of complex characters, depth of story, and richness of mythology will break new ground and boldly push Star Wars in ways I find incredibly exciting. That's as long as your ass doesn't get involved with the quotas and the agendas and the forced diversity. Tell a good story first, and it seems like these guys might be able to, if you stay out of it. In the summer of 1977, we traveled to a galaxy far, far away, and we've been dreaming of it ever since, Benioff and Weiss said in a joint statement. We are honored by the opportunity, a little terrified by the responsibility, and so excited to get started as soon as the final season of Game of Thrones is complete. No release dates have been set for the new films, and there have been, thankfully, no sightings of White Walkers around Lucasfilm. I don't get that joke at the end. I guess this is supposed to be good news, but I've noticed one thing in a lot of comment sections over on Facebook. People are kind of starting to say it's enough. Like, I haven't seen many comments go, oh, this is great news, blah, 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 blah. I've seen either Game of Thrones sucks the last 2 seasons, or I've seen, really, more Star Wars movies. We're not even done with the ones, and they're not that good. So, full transparency, I've seen 1 episode of Game of Thrones, and I wasn't impressed. It was, I guess, the first episode where the little boy sees the brother and sister sleeping together, and they push him out of the tower in the castle. That's all I've seen of Game of Thrones, so I can't accurately judge these guys' work based on Game of Thrones. But I do have to wonder if it's them that makes Game of Thrones what it is, or George R.R. Martin. Because I do know their books, and usually the author is better than the person who adapts it. But that's a topic for another day. My point is, though, more Star Wars movies are announced at the worst time possible. I could understand if we were riding high. Like, I know everyone likes to give me shit when I say this, but let's go back to 2012 and talk about the Avengers. Everyone I was with, the theater, we all just were riding high after the Avengers. We're like, oh my god, what's next? And then they announced, oh, we got movies till 2022 or whatever, and we were all just like, awesome. And while they have been good, I'm going to speak for me and my friends, we've all been starting to feel a little less than enthused each time something comes out. It's like, okay, well, we made it through Guardians 2 and it was good. Okay, well, we made it through Spider-Man. And while we're still excited for Infinity War, it's like, holy shit, that's the big one. It's like, oh, we got another one with Black Panther. These things have just become another one. With Star Wars, none of us are happy, again, speaking for the world-class bullshitters, and it's just like they keep piling it on. Now, you could argue, oh, they make billions of dollars each one. No one's tired of these movies. Well, they make progressively less. And we don't know what the true cost of these movies are. We're just looking at the grosses. We don't know what the profit for Disney is, which they don't usually tend to announce that. So, even if the movie makes $1.2 billion and it costs $500 or $600 million to make, we're looking at something highly less profitable. And with this sentiment right now of kind of burnout with Star Wars fatigue, the announcement of more Star Wars movies is just in bad taste. It's always refreshing to think like, oh, we're at the end of something. You know, like when you're at the end of school. I remember my last semester of college, even though the previous semester had been a lot of hard work, I knew that that last one was the last one, and I was excited to get it over with and just live through it. Now, if I had to start from the beginning of school, it would just be like, oh, there's so much left to do, and it would seem so cumbersome to get through. That's with Star Wars. It's like, when you can see the end in sight, you're willing to sit through the bullshit. Me personally, I'm willing to sit through episode 9 just to get it over with, and then I'm kind of done. Like, I plan on the second phase of this channel being in effect by the time that these Game of Thrones guys' Star Wars movie would be out, and maybe I won't have to go and see them because I don't want to. I just don't care about Star Wars anymore. I've said it before, I'll say it again. They bastardize the characters I care about. They build up these stupid characters like Rey, Finn, Poe Dameron, Jyn Erso, Vice Admiral Holdo, all these other dumb, useless characters that people aren't going to like in 20 years because Star Wars isn't going to make it another 20 years. Hell, Star Wars ain't going to make it another 10 years. By 2028, they'll be like, yeah, Star Wars was this great franchise, blah, 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 and then oversaturation hit. And I think people will feel about that movie, or those Star Wars movies, the way people felt about the old X-Men movies. They were popular when they came out, and people were pumped to see them. They made a lot of money, but now it's just like, yeah, they're whatever. X-Men's a franchise that I don't need to see another one of. And that's where we are with Star Wars. So, Game of Thrones be damned. I have no interest in this. So, since these guys tend to write, I guess Game of Thrones is like sword and sorcery shit with political intrigue and violence and sex and all that, we're going to get a tamer version of Star Wars Game of Thrones. And I mean, just because I haven't seen episodes of Game of Thrones, I do know what it looks like. I've seen Emilia Clarke with her blonde hair. And I know there's a running joke that people are going to say, oh, there's going to be all this nudity and all this great stuff. Look, it's still put out by Disney. It's going to be a PG film. PG-13 at the riskiest. They're never going to give us an R-rated Star Wars flick because they want to sell toys. Even though the merchandise doesn't sell, they're still going to market it that way. So you'll get these fakely or falsely aggressive Star Wars films written by dudes that have to pass through the Kathleen Kennedy filter. And the Kathleen Kennedy filter needs to be just removed completely from the situation. I know I've said it in previous episodes or videos that Gary Kurtz was the George Lucas filter, and he helped filter out some of the dumber ideas that George Lucas had. Same thing with Gil Taylor, who was, I think, the director of photography, who came up with like the Death Star lighting and did some things that kept George Lucas in line and, you know, held him back a little bit. With the Kathleen Kennedy situation, you just need to remove that filter because her ideals aren't in the right place. She's really worried about agenda and politics and all these other things and not story first, because if we weren't focused on 2017 politics, The Last Jedi wouldn't be what it is. We wouldn't have these weak guys like Rian Johnson directing the movie. I'll even throw J.J. Abrams in there as a weak guy because J.J. Abrams doesn't really create anything on his own. He just kind of borrows what Steven Spielberg did 30 years ago. The only guy that I think you could actually get in there to make a strong Star Wars film would be Steven Spielberg. He's bigger than Kathleen Kennedy. She can't dictate anything to him. Even if he wanted to play ball, if she came up with some bullshit parameters, he would just say no, and he could do that. And that would be refreshing. I think somebody like him does know what Star Wars is. I think him being friends with George Lucas helps and all that sort of stuff. So, that aside, Kathleen Kennedy is just too domineering. And you could get, I'm trying to think of a great writer. You could get Ray Bradbury himself resurrected from the grave to write some really awesome and powerful science fiction. And her ass would still find a way to chop it up to her liking. And who is she to make Star Wars in her liking? She's not really a fan of Star Wars. At every chance she gets, she wants to tout how the Force is female and her female writers groups and all this other shit. It's never about the service of the story. So what I'm trying to say, if I'm saying anything at all, is don't get too excited about the news. If you're a Game of Thrones fan and you think, oh man, I love Game of Thrones, when you put Game of Thrones and Star Wars together, you're going to get something great. Not until you get that woman out of the equation. For me, someone who's a longtime Star Wars fan, I just want this shit to end. It's like when you have a sick family member and they keep going through some terrible cancer treatment and every day something new pops up. You just want them to be out of their misery and their pain, and you want them to find peace. I want Star Wars to find peace. I want them to keep some of the respectability left in the franchise. I mean, it's literally being hoarded out before our eyes. We can't even get through one poorly received saga until We have another one announced, and now another one announced. So hypothetically, there's like 12 Star Wars movies on the docket. I know they'll make money. We don't know how much profit they'll make, so stop making those excuses for a fucking billion-dollar corporation. And the fatigue is real. I know I'm not the only person that feels it. You better space these things out. I know Game of Thrones ends, I think, in 2019. And they're going to start working on that, so those will probably be in production concurrently with the Rian Johnson saga. How the hell are you going to pull off 2 Star Wars trilogies at once? They barely can put together a Star Wars trilogy with episodes 7 through 9. These movies don't have any internal logic. They contradict each other. There's just all sorts of problems with said movies. And you gotta wonder, like, is this intentional? Or is she just so full of herself that she doesn't realize the damage she's doing? So, that's it for my rant. I could probably go on for another hour. This was an unscripted rant, and there's just a lot of questions. But the number one question is why? Why another fucking saga? Why more Star Wars movies? So you tell me down in the comments below what you guys think about it. Do you think it's good news? Do you think it's bad news? Are you tired of this stuff? Do you think the Star Wars fatigue is just going to be hammered home even harder? Like I said before, I'm done after episode 9. Hypothetically, I'd love to never have to sit through another one of these movies again. I'd like to sit at home and just watch the original movie, and sometimes Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and get my complete Star Wars fix that way. I don't need to buy new merchandise or wear t-shirts or anything. I just need to basically watch those 2 movies and be on my merry way. Star Wars is very, very dead to me. It's embarrassing at this point to call myself a Star Wars fan. I don't know if I ever told this story on air before, but I was at a GameStop once buying, I don't know what I pre-ordered, some game, and the guy goes, "Would you like to pre-order Star Wars Battlefront 2? And I looked the man in the eye and I said, "I'm not a Star Wars fan." Ugh. So yeah, I've said that before. So that's the video. Thanks for watching, folks. If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. Hit the little bell notification for all the world-class bullshitters content. If you're already a subscriber, you notice we've been putting out a lot more content. That's because the people that help us out on Patreon have given us the ability to make more content. We've got new equipment. Soon we'll have a website. All kinds of great things. Merchandise. Because of you people. So thank you to the 100+ of you that have made Patreon possible. And for anyone who hears this and would like to help out, $1 a month goes a long way. 17 cents a day, which equals $5 a month, goes even longer, and you get stuff. You get a digital poster. You can ask questions that are always going to be answered on the show, no matter the topic. You can appear on the show at higher tier levels. So patreon.com/worldclassbs. Join that. Be a part of the show. And help us grow even further. So I will be back tomorrow with Comment Slam, the old series where Kendo and I go through and read comments on some YouTube videos. And this week we did the Solo A Star Wars Story trailer. So if you're excited for that, make sure you subscribe, go back and watch the old episodes, and stay tuned for more.